Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Our Kids Play Hockey. We want to let you know that we have once again been honored with a nomination for the Hockey Podcast of the Year via the Sports Podcasting Awards. And all you need to do to help us is go to ourkidsplayhockey.com and click on the Vote Now button. It asks you a couple questions. You're in and you're out, and you have voted for us for Hockey Podcast of the Year. I want to thank you all for being a wonderful, wonderful audience and helping us get to this stature of hockey podcasting, because we've done it as a family, as the hockey friends and families around the world. Thanks so much and enjoy this episode of Our Kids Play Hockey. Hello, hockey friends and families around the world. Welcome to another action-packed edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. That's Christie Burns. That's also Mike Benelli. I am Lee Elias. Today, our topic is a good one. This is like one of those evergreen topics. You can watch this show whenever you want, before the season, in the season, after the season. It works no matter what point of the season you're in. We're talking about the keys to captaincy. Now, this is one of those topics that I think a lot of people go, I know everything there is to know about captaincy. It's easy. This is such a huge topic. It really is something to break down. We're definitely going to talk about things today that I guarantee you've never thought about when it comes to captaincy on both sides of the aisle, whether you're a coach, a player, the captain yourself, a parent, or just a player on the team. This is a great topic to learn a lot about leadership. And I'm really excited to talk to you guys about this today with my two friends here. We're going to dive right into it with really just the basic question: what is captaincy, right? Now, aside the obvious of just the player wearing the C that's the leader of the team, captaincy breaks down into something a bit more than that. All right. Captaincy is a role. Captaincy is a responsibility. And the way I like to break this down is the responsibilities throughout the team. And this is where it gets complicated right away, right? There's a role from the coach to the captain to the coach, the captain to the players, and the players to the captain. And they all work in this big circle I call the circle of trust. To give a player the C, or for a player to wear the C, is a direct connection from that player to the coach to communicate. It's also a connection from the player to communicate with his team up and down. So when players have something they can only tell the captain can then tell the coach, keeping in mind that it should be kept secret if it needs to be, right? Well, I always said this. I don't like rats on teams. I always said that. Never do a rat. The only rat in the hockey is Brad Marchand, and he gets a free pass because he's totally marketed that to the best place he could possibly do it. It's a connection point, all right? It's an ability to communicate. And if that does not exist with your captain, it can become a problem. So this is where I'm going to bring in my two, not guests, my friends. Again, Christie Burns, wave, there you go. And Mike Benelli, once again. We're going to talk about this at every level, and we're going to talk about how it coincides with making this role something that's really important for your team. Now, Mike, I'm going to start with you on this, because one of the funny things about captaincy is we do have to break this down by ages. So the way we're going to do this is kind of using the traditional terms. We're going to look at it from like an Adam to Squirt type age group, then a Pee-wee to junior type age group. So that kind of brings you from 6 years old till about 8 or 9 years old, and then 10 years old kind of through high school, right? And Mike, to start with Adam and Squirts, I always think captaincy is kind of a weird thing. I personally don't think, unless it's very obvious that there's a leader on the team, that the captaincy should even be considered at this age. You agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, so basically, I think if you can lay out to your kids and your parents, because at that age, it's all about, how the parents are perceiving what your thoughts are, right?
Right.
You got to just outline what those qualities of a leader are for the players. And I think, instead of naming a captain, maybe at that age, the kids are going to figure out who those kids are that exhibit those qualities. Right. And I think it's our job, I think, as coaches and parents to, let those kids understand that these are the qualities that we're looking for, and let that come out in a player. Because sometimes you're not, you could have a captain that doesn't exhibit all those qualities, but a lot of kids pick kids because they're the best kid, right? They go, oh, that's the best kid on the team, he must be the captain. And I think that's at the younger levels, identify what are the qualities, and then bring those out in as many kids as you can in that age group.
Right, because at that age, it's all about development, and this is part of the development of every kid on the ice, right? To learn how to become a leader. Christie, from a parental point of view, I mean, you've been through this with two kids, right? Mm-hmm. What are some of the things you've noticed about captaincy, really those younger ages, if there even is a captain at all?
Right. And I liked one year, our sport hockey coach, and this was combination girls and boys on a team. He waited for a month before he named the captain,
right,
to see if those characteristics that y'all just talked about existed. And if he saw those elements, those personality traits, those leadership skills in the kid in a month's time. So everybody, it was kind of cool because everybody wanted to be the captain.
Right.
So they were all on their best behavior. And it really, some kids really elevated themselves and showed some real leadership skills and got named captain and then assistant captains as well. We had another coach who would rotate them every week. Okay, today this game, you're going to be captain. Okay, next week. And everybody got to be a captain. That was kind of cool at the younger ages, just so that they kind of got a feel for that response, a little taste of that leadership. I didn't mind that when they were really young to rotate it. As you get older, I don't think the rotation is good. Yeah.
I agree. In fact, later in the show, and this is actually okay that you brought this up. Later in the show, we're going to talk about the different methods to choose a captain. But I think at the younger levels, I think that is one we can mention right now, that rotating the C is actually a really great thing to do, in my opinion. And again, I will preface this. The three of us may disagree on some of these methods, which is absolutely okay. Each coach, each team has to kind of find their own method. I've said this before. There's no right way to pick a captain. There are wrong ways to pick a captain. But at the younger ages, that Adams to Squirt level, I think unless a clear leader emerges, the rotating C is great because then it becomes a shared responsibility throughout the team. And then everyone can feel what it means to be the leader, but also how to be led. We talked about this. Great captains typically know how to be led, right? I used to tell my players, I'll probably repeat this a few times on the episode, that if you need that C to be a leader, you probably shouldn't have the C, right? The best captains that I've ever been on a team with didn't necessarily even want to be captain. I'd say half the times they didn't even want to be captain, right? They just became the best leader on the team, and that's why they earned it. We're going to get into that too. So again, Adam to Squirt, I think we got to look at this like we break down everything else, right? Mike and Christie, which is at those levels, it's all about developing skill sets, right? Well, leadership can be looked at as a skill set. So if we're teaching young people the fundamentals of leadership, right? It's not about the best player on the team. It's about what are the core values of a good leader: trust, teamwork, looking out for your teammates, right? Being able to communicate very clearly. I've always said this, and this almost has nothing to do with hockey, but I'll use it as a hockey term. If I was the best tactician on the planet Earth, the best, and I was a really poor communicator, it's almost a wasted skill set because I can't communicate to the team how to do the tactics that I want them to do. So communication is a huge part of this, right? Now, again, Adam to Squirt's a pretty easy one. Again, leaders do emerge at this level sometimes. Some young kids look at the world through a leadership lens. It's very easy to pick them out. Most of the players tend to look up to them, and they typically earn the C on their own. Now, when you get past Squirt, you get to that Pee-wee area. Now, Pee-wee to junior is an interesting time. This is like that 11-year-old to basically, we'll go up to 20 because of junior, but really 11 to 18. Things really take a turn here because captaincy all of a sudden has a sparkle to it. It has an ability to make someone larger than life. It's a huge deal. Suddenly you're emulating the NHL, right? So captaincy becomes a really important thing when you get to these older levels. And I think this is where I want to transition into the ways to choose a captain, okay? Because I think there are some misconceptions about how to choose a captain. Now, there's two parts to how to choose a captain. I'm going to first go over, and we're going to discuss this, some of the ways people decide to choose a captain. And we can discuss whether we think that they're right or wrong. The first one is athletic skill. The best player on the team has to be the captain. Now, this is one that I don't agree with, but typically captains with skill do deserve it. But I never base my decision on a captain on, well, that's the best player on the team. Okay? Because in my opinion, and I want you two to sound off about this, in my opinion, the most valuable player on the team is not necessarily the most talented. For me, the most valuable player on the team is the one that works harder than everybody else, regardless of their talent level, because that sets the bar for everybody. There have been many players I've had that have gotten very little ice time, but they work harder than everybody else. I will typically give that person a letter. It might not be the C, but I will give them the letter because I want my team to know that's the standard I'm trying to meet. And to be honest with you, to be the player that doesn't play a lot, but works harder than everybody else, or at least sets the bar for the amount of hard work, that's a very hard leadership role to be in. It is painful at many times. I've been in that role. I've been on both sides of that role where I'm a very talented player or maybe not the most talented player. So again, Christie, I'll turn to you with this one because again, I know that your daughter was a captain, if I'm not mistaken. So there's been leadership in your family. You're a leader in your community. You're a leader in the newsroom. There you go. There's a jersey with the C on it. For those of you watching the episode, it was a nice golden C on her Lakers jersey. It's actually a really nice jersey. But Kristen, let me start with you. Is athletic skill a good factor to choose a captain?
Not the only factor, but I do think it has to factor in.
That's fair.
Because you also have to have the kids respect you as well.
Right.
And set a good example. But if you're always working hard, I mean, you're going to get better anyway. But yeah, I do think that some athleticism has to come into play too.
Right.
Yeah,
right. That's also where leading by example comes in, right? So I've said this, that the player that doesn't play a lot, it's not that I don't want to give them the C, but the person on the ice has to represent the team quite a bit, right? Yeah. So Mike, throwing this over to you, or Saucer passing it over to you as I emulate Doc Emmerich, spiriting the puck to you. Athletic skill, how much does that play into your decision when a captain is chosen?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the age, but I think as the kids get older, to Christie's point, they get a bit of respect from the coach and from the other players, but also because of your athletic skill and your role on the team.
Right.
You're just going to be more valuable to the coach. I mean, you can't be designated as a captain with a kid that, by a kid that you might cut,
right. That's fair.
Season. Maybe he's the hardest working kid and he's the nicest kid and the best kid is doing all kinds of stuff for you. But maybe the players aren't going to be around, for very long.
That's fair.
I've seen that at the high school level where you got to be careful about picking kids because of their academics. And you're like, I'm going to lose this kid after first semester. He's the greatest kid, but I just can't keep him here. So who do I give that seat to that I can keep around? And I think there's a reason why a lot of goalies aren't captains, right? Is because, all of a sudden the goalie has a bad stretch and that attitude of being a captain sways because of the kids' playing time. And, and their role of, being able to go out and talk to the team. Right. But I think there's so many of those factors that come into play.
Yeah. And I also think, to your point, like having that athletic skill is really important too, because they're going to be out on the ice representing the team. Right. And there are times when the team captains go and they have to meet with the refs and discuss the call and that kind of thing. So, I mean, you have to have a kid who's out there a lot.
Yeah, and I'll say this to both of you, hopefully, and this is the ideal situation, hopefully the player with the top athletic skill or a player with extreme athletic skill, hopefully that skill was earned by working your butt off throughout the years, right?
Right, because that's what I'm saying.
Right, and I think that's what we're all saying, right? Because, look, we've all run into players that are just gifted, but maybe don't have that leadership ability, meaning that they're just gifted with a skill set, but they were gifted with it, literally, right? I mean, there's a difference between a kid who had to earn it and a kid who's gifted with it. Now, neither one of them's wrong or anything like that. I'm not going there with it, but you really have to check and make sure that kid's a leader. Now, Mike, you brought up a great point, and you guys know I love to tell stories on this podcast. When I was in college, my second year, we had a player that was a gifted hockey player, gifted. His talent was undeniable, but horrible in the classroom, horrible influence. And I remember this player was enabled by our coaching staff because of his skill set. And it really started to deteriorate our team because this player had, if you can believe this, a below 1.0 GPA, which you really got to try. If anybody knows how this works in college, you really got to try and get below a 1.0. Okay. That's not something that's easy to do. And as the season went on, the first half of the season, it was pretty obvious this player was going to flunk out of school by the halfway point. And at that time, you could continue to play with a horrible GPA until the halfway through the season point. That's just the way the rules were set up. It's not like that anymore, right? But this kid kept getting enabled, and he got more and more ice time. And we had a lot of players on the team that were scholars and working our butts off, and we were losing ice time to this kid. And it destroyed the team, right? So yes, he scored a lot of goals, and yes, he was a great hockey player, but it wasn't worth enabling him because it destroyed the team. So that was a poor example of enabling someone with athletic skill who was not a good leader. And I'm just displaying that because, again, I don't want anyone to think that I'm saying here that athletic skill is not a major factor. It really is. As Christie said, this person has to represent your team on the ice. Hopefully they're out there and they're star. Okay, but
it's the other way too, Lee. It's like the kid that want, like when you get on a team where the kids want that kid,
right?
and they say, no, we need him to win. I go, no. But and he's doing everything wrong. So you as a coach, it's like, how are you, like, I don't even want this kid as the captain, but all you guys want him because he's scoring, you're going to win games. And I think that all comes down to how are you communicating?
Right. How you define winning.
What's the expectation you have? If you're in a college program, you're in a club team, a Division III team, a team that's not, that your goal is not to go play, pro hockey. Sometimes you got to look at what's the bigger message that we're sending as educators. And I think that's a hard juggling match when you say, well, if I strip this kid of his captaincy, we're not winning because we just don't have the talent. But in my eyes, I'm like, but we're all losing because we're allowing this to go on and on and on. And it's really hard to go back once you establish that type of culture.
Well, and again, look, this show is all about youth hockey, right? And again, we've said this many times. When you get to the pro levels, even the collegiate levels and some levels, the conversation shifts slightly. But when you get to the youth level, this is all about developing good human beings, good human people, right? Good human beings, good people, right? Like that's the goal. Okay. And again, I understand the big game. I understand that. Like I've played my whole life. I don't want anybody listening to think I don't want to win. All right. Winning is very important to me. And I hate losing, but I also see the bigger picture that Mike's talking about. Am I creating productive people for the planet, which we desperately need right now? All right. And look, just to let you know that this does go to the pro level, right? We're recording this on January 11th, 2021. A prominent NFL quarterback was just dropped by his team who was a captain due to his conduct off the field. And the head coach of this team, who's trying to build a new culture in this city, dropped him. They didn't trade him. They dropped him off the team. And this was a first-round draft pick because he was not conducive to the culture that they were trying to create in this city. That tells you everything you need to know, that even at the pro level, there is some responsibility to understand that wearing that C comes with a lot of responsibility. This player did not exhibit that, and they were dropped from the team. Right now, I'm sure that player will play again, and hopefully they learn their lesson, right? But for a head coach to drop a player off the team that was a captain and a prominent player on the team says a lot to me. It shows you that this isn't just at the youth level. We had JB Spizzo on the show the other week, and it's funny because a lot of things people, I think about pro sports are not always the same thing. The glorified captain, right? It's not always that simple. The best captains try and become better leaders. Right. And we've had leaders at the pro ranks that were not great leaders and they fall off. So anyway, let's keep going here. Again, ways to choose a captain. I'm going to kind of breeze through these three, but athletic skill is one of them. Another one is popularity. Another one is seniority. Another one is necessity. Right. So when I talk about popularity, this is usually the wrong way to pick a captain, which is typically just letting the players pick the most popular player in the room. Again, if that person's responsible enough and they deserve it, which happens, it's fine, but I wouldn't believe that to be the only reason. And then seniority typically comes into the high school teams. Mike, you alluded to this before, where, you've had a player that's been there for 4 years and you pick a freshman as captain. This is one of those that you got to go team by team by team to really pick this one as a method. I do think seniority plays into the decision if the elder player is in a good position to lead. And hopefully, if you've done this right, you've created this culture of accountability on your team where players are nurtured into that role as they get older, right? So
Mike, you want a bit more maturity too, especially when you're talking about the high school level,
right?
And familiarity with how the game works and the season goes, so they can help lead the team through the ups and the downs, because chances are they've already been through that.
Right.
Which is very valuable for the younger ones. And naming a freshman as a captain, I agree with you, Mike. It's not a good practice just because you're not going to have the respect.
Right.
And they're not seasoned. They don't have the maturity or the experiences to lead a team.
How about this, Christie? I agree with you 100%. I would say this, that it's possible for an underclassman to be captain, but it is extremely rare. It's extremely rare. And when it happens, you just kind of know, because the seniors will tell you, the seniors in the upperclassmen will tell you that kid needs to be captain. All right. The only other time too, and I have to say this, the only other time that there's an exception to that rule is if you don't have a lot of upperclassmen on the team. Right. I have seen teams that are heavily sophomores and freshmen, but that's a different situation. Mike, let's backhand pass to you on this one. With seniority on as a leadership tactic.
Yeah, so it's also depending on the culture that you're creating in your team. I mean, if
Right.
you have a really bad locker room, if you have seniors that you're not going to mind,
It's a great point.
listen, I'm changing the culture. This is what I want to emulate. What you guys have done, especially a new coach. You come in, you have this I've seen captains at every level, but especially the high school and prep school level, where like, this is the way we do things. You've got to earn your right. You've got to be hazed. And everybody's like, well, I don't really like that. Like, I don't even think that this should be part of the culture that we have. And I think that, that I love that feeling that when you make the team, and JB alluded to this too, you're on the team.
Right.
Whether you're a freshman or a senior, you made the team. I'm the coach. I put you on the team. You're on the team. We're all equal. Now, are we equal in what we do with the team? Not necessarily. But sometimes you have to look at those upperclassmen and say, you know what? I really don't trust in how they're going to help me, and I'll never be able to change the way our team reacts and acts. And to your point, now, if you have 18 seniors, it's going to be a little harder. If you have 2 seniors and maybe two juniors, and all of a sudden you got this sophomore and freshman that are leading the way, you've got to find a way to help them nurture their ability. And maybe that's when you turn back and say, well, there's no captains this year.
Right.
We're going to allow everybody to lead. And I think then, as you go on, you're going to see maybe, especially in a new team, now can I trust these players? And towards the end of the year, there's no rule that says you can't name a captain at the end of the year that says now they're the captain, like because of the way they led. And I think that's because that is a big deal. If you're in high school and you leave there as a captaincy, nobody's going to say you're the captain for a week. They don't know if you're a captain for 3 years. It's just I think it's a big deal for a lot of kids. And I think that you as an adult and as a leader need to nurture that.
Yeah. Christie, did you got something? I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, boy, you got to have some mental toughness there.
Right.
Especially if you're dealing with a bunch of sour seniors. You got to make sure that kid's mentally tough to handle that.
Well, you got to know how to frame it, right? You have to be able to let that player know that I'm going to support you through this. I'm not just going to throw you to the wolves and say, okay, go in the locker room and lead. I know you're 14, but you got to tell a bunch of 18-year-olds what to do. That's not really that to me. Again, that's your responsibility as a leader as well, to make sure you're putting that kid in this right situation.
Look, I create cultures in locker rooms. That's one of my main jobs, right? And this is one of those things where it's like, let's just say you're going to make a sophomore a captain. It's possible, right? Or a junior. Maybe there's a junior and there's a lot of seniors. One of the things you can do as a coach in that position is explain to the seniors why you're doing that, and then have them even help to cultivate that culture for that captain. Because the truth is this: great captains are supported by their players and their coaches. I alluded to this earlier. Whenever I'm on a team, I do a lot of meetings with my captains. And I mean that once a week, I'll have a captain's meeting with them so they can sound off to me the concerns of the players. Again, not so much specific player names, but look, this is what we're hearing. They're my pulse to the players, right? And then I also give them some insights, like, here's what we're thinking as a coaching staff. What are your thoughts? I really enable that relationship, and I really cherish that relationship because it's a conduit, right? It's my ability to talk to the players through their leader and to go back and forth. Now, listen, it's not a democracy. I mean, we've all heard that growing up. It's not a democracy. As the coach or the coaching staff, you have the final say. But if you're not taking a moment to at least listen, I think it's a missed opportunity in a lot of ways. So if I was going to name a younger person captain, I'd want my seniors to understand why. I'd have a meeting with them, explain why. And they don't have to be happy about it, but I want them to know why. All right. And, there's another great saying that I like to say, that the captain of the team is always grooming the next captain. Right. That's where A's are really important. You could be grooming another player. I'll tell you again, love my stories here. When I was in college, my freshman year, we won a championship, and a big part of it was because of our captain. And I'll never forget this. He was doing a media interview before a game, and we had a playoff game, and the interviewer asked him, fair question, you're the captain of the team. How are you going to lead this team tonight? And he said something, I'll never forget this, and this was like a life moment for me. He said, I know I wear the C, but honestly, to win this game, every player on the team needs to be a captain tonight. We all need to lead together. Man, that hit me really hard, right? For first off, for him to say that publicly on a camera, like he's challenging all of us in a good way, right? But he also said that this is a shared responsibility. I might have this letter on my chest, but it's a shared responsibility. Man, was that a consummate captain to me in that moment. I really understood what being a leader was. It wasn't about me as the captain. It was about the team. He got that. This guy was also 6'5" and gigantic. So he's an imposing figure. Like he's what you'd expect a captain to look like. And here he is telling me as a freshman, I need you to be a leader tonight. Right. That was a great leader. All right. And then, I remember coaching college, right? This is a good story too, because this is almost the opposite, Mike. This alerts to your story. When I took over a college team, I was 22 years old. I was the youngest college coach in history in GM. I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm just trying to give you some context here. All right. And the team I was taking over had a 5-25 season the year before I got there. And my first order of business was I held a 6 a.m. practice. And I said, if you want to be here, be here. Right. And this is what's funny. Everybody showed up, but the 3 best players on the team. All right. And I kicked them off the team because they didn't show up. Now, to be fair, these 3 players had about 90% of the points. They also were involved with, I'll say, extracurricular activities that are not stuff you can be doing to be on a college team. And I kicked them off the team. And one of them had a letter. And I remember that the team thought it was crazy. And I said that as Mike said, we're creating a new culture, and that is not what I'm looking for. Right. So a new leader will emerge. I'm expecting you all to be leaders. I echoed my captain until that happens. And sure enough, I think a month or 2 in the season, it was very obvious who the captains were going to be. And we had a very nice ceremony to name them captain. And the entire team bought in. It was just complete team building, bonding in that moment. And it was a great season. We went 25-5 and missed the national tournament by 1 game, right, in the playoffs. Culture is everything. All right. If you don't have a good culture, your team simply will not win. All right. I've never seen it happen. I've never seen a team win where they had a horrible culture. And a captain's a big part of that. Those are
Because
two.
that could have gone the other way for you easily.
In terms of kicking those kids off the team.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, Christie, I didn't care if we lost games because of it, because I knew we weren't going to win with it. So my attitude is, again, they went 5-25 with these kids the year before. So my attitude is at that point is, we're not winning with you. All right. And again, you're enabling kids to, and I'll be very upfront. You're enabling kids to do drugs, drink heavily, do bad in school. That's just not what I'm looking for as a coach. Now, I will tell you all this. I do not know how I had the clairvoyancy at 22 to do that.
Yeah.
All right. I was just out of college myself, but I knew that was not going to make us win. All right. And then, by the way, after that 6 a.m. practice, my first practice on the ice, we want to talk about setting standards. My first practice was a 60-minute practice with no pucks. And I told the team, I want you to know what it means to skate for 60 minutes because that's how long games are in college. Right. It was a hard practice, but they all did it. Right. That I was setting a brand new standard. We are no longer a losing culture. Right. We might not win a lot this year, even though we did. We might not win a lot this year, but we're definitely not going to lose like that. Right. And I did not have one player on that team that was a first team or second team all-star at the end of the year. We just collectively won.
That took a lot of guts because, I think back to, the high school years,
right.
There are kids on their team who aren't, who are doing drugs and, not pay attention to school. That exists.
Yeah,
and
college.
Coaches tend to not address it.
Right.
They just look the other way because they don't want to get involved. They want everything to be copacetic.
Right.
Let's not make any waves. So it takes guts to do that.
Yeah. And again, look, I can't reiterate this enough. We had to change the culture. I think the fact I was so young, I was probably more fearless at that age. But the funny thing is I would still do that today. I might try and speak to those captains a bit more. Like I was very hammered down at that time and it worked.
Yeah.
All right. But again, even at that age, I mean, keep in mind, I was 22. Some of these kids were 20, 21. Some of the kids on the team I could have played with. So I think at that time I did the right thing. Right. I'm not saying there's other ways that it could have been handled, but yeah, like I said, shock the guts up on that one to me being really young and fearless. But, yeah, look, again, there's so many stories about this. I wanted to share that one because the point is this, do not enable a player that's going to hurt your team culture. All right. We're going to get into it a little bit later about what happens if you have a great captain and they get in trouble a little later. But before we do that, I want to talk about the actual methods for choosing a captain, because I think this is important. There's typically 3, right? There's the coach's choice, there's the player vote, and then a rotating C. All right. We talked about the rotating C earlier. If a captain doesn't emerge, I love the rotating C because it gives everybody a little bit of a taste of leadership. You have a captain on the ice. Typically, you will find a captain with that method. It's a great teaching tool, right? And you typically see this at the younger levels. You'll see it in Pee Wee sometimes, right? Or as we said, on a high school team where there's a lot of young players. That's another time period to rotate, right? I'll tell you both this right now, and you might disagree with me. I don't agree with the player vote. I believe that the captaincy is something sacred. I believe that's a coach's right to pick a captain. That's one of those things that I kind of put my hand down on. This is the coach's right. And because I've said to it, the captain's the conduit of communication. It's very important as a coach that you put the right person in that role in terms of overall team culture, right? It doesn't mean that you can't pick a kid and then really work with them to become that player. I'm not saying that that's not possible, but that's why I don't like the player vote, because then it typically becomes a popularity contest or skill contest. I'm not saying you won't get the right person into the role, but you run the risk of getting the wrong person in that role. And I don't like that. Mike, I'll go to you first, and then Christie, I will slap shot the puck over to you for your response. I'm really channeling the transitions today, but Mike, again, and we might disagree on this. Mike, what are your kind of ways of looking at that when you choose a captain within a team?
Yeah, so I do like to have the players' input. I think if you lay it out and the players know, right? I mean, one thing you want to be careful of is you don't want to say you're giving players input and then you pick your own captain, because they all knew who they voted for. I mean, they were like, you vote, how do you not get in? So I think it's a matter of, like, I've always, depending on the team and depending on the numbers and depending on how everything lays out, again, 18 seniors and 2 juniors, and your best kid is your junior, that, maybe those seniors are going to outweigh the junior. So I've always had, I've always tried to be pretty transparent with the kids at the high school level, prep school level, college level, that, listen, you all get a say.
Right.
I want to hear your feedback, but my vote counts like 5 votes, and the assistant coach has 5 votes. So if the coaching staff could almost outvote the team, because at the end of the day, as long as you're transparent, say, I need this player to work with me. Right. I don't need the Herb Brooks. I want you all against me. I'm gonna create a culture that you all hate me so much that you're gonna bind together. Right. Because it doesn't work like that. That wouldn't work for me. Yeah.
It wouldn't work today, unfortunately, either.
It's harder to work today. But I think, but there are aspects of it that I like, right? So I think the players having an input, I really do like, because I always like to hear, like, what is it that I don't know about these kids that this is so popular? Like, why is this kid being, like, why are 9 kids voting for this kid? I would never vote for this kid. And then based off of that, you could change culture. If they're, to your point, Lee, if they're voting for that kid because he's out, he's the beer run guy, in college, like, okay, well, this is something we need to change internally. Right. And it's good for me to know this information. But at the end of the day, I completely agree that the person that you put in those positions, the people, need to be able to be with you and be on the same page as you. They can't fight against you. You need to be people that are an echo chamber to you as a coach. If
they're fighting you, you might not have a job long too. That's you could have a coup really quick.
You think about, that's a whole, that again, it all depends on where you're at, right? But I think eliminating and keeping the players out of the process at the older levels really sometimes could bite you, only because they all know, right? They know, well, why, we want to have a say in this, but be transparent about it. I think it's and at the younger levels, I think it's as long as you define why you're picking those kids, right, then you can help make that justification. But I think at the younger levels, it probably becomes more and more popular. Like, oh, this kid's the best kid on the team. He's the funniest kid in the locker room. Right. And I'm not it's a team by team kind of function, but overall, I like the fact that everybody's collaborating, and your assistant coaches. You can't just say, "Hey, guess what? I just made Lee the captain." They're like, "What the hell are you talking about?" Right. You need feedback. Yeah. Like, so just having that consistency in how you're going to approach, who you're going to put into leadership roles. Going back, I just want to say something too. Going back to what you were saying earlier about the need to know these kids. All the teams I've ever worked with at the high school, prep school, and college level, I've always made it a point to have like a weekly breakfast with the captains.
Right. Brilliant.
The captain's mentor, like always have a freshman and a sophomore representative there. Like say we might have a captain's meeting for breakfast, but I'm like, hey, listen, guys, I want you to invite one of the freshmen. I don't care who it is. Doesn't have to be the best kid, worst kid, geekiest kid, whatever it is.
Right.
Invite them in.
That's
and
grooming.
I want to be in an inner circle here so that they can help us, like, to your point, how are we creating culture? And, if you have really good players at the younger level and then don't respect the older level kids, that the culture could go the other way as well, pretty quickly. So,
that's a great formula, having that kind of input. I remember my daughter, when she joined the high school team as a sophomore, they had 2 captains, both of them seniors, but such great leaders. And they mentored Sophia and, brought her, just like you did, brought her into those discussions. So she eventually became a captain her junior and senior year, but she learned so much because they always invited her into the circle, because, they look for the kids with the potential leadership skills. And so you teach them young what it is to be a great leader. And that year, when they were her sophomore year, they won the state championship. And a lot of it had to do with the leadership by those captains, as well as their talent.
Absolutely. It's funny. I look back on my own experience here. You learn from the good and the bad, right? I always say my coaching style was born from the good coaches I've had, but also the bad coaches, because they taught me how not to coach. And I think captaincy runs the same way. When I was a bantam, my first year of bantam, I remember I joined a new team I'd never been on. It was one of my favorite years in hockey. And I remember that I was awarded an A, probably past the halfway point of the season. I wasn't expecting it. And I remember that my coach told me, you just work so hard and you have the biggest heart on the team. And he says, that's why I'm giving you this, because I want the other players to see it. That was my first experience with a letter. So that set the standard pretty high, right? So what's funny about this story, and this shows you how this can go both ways, is that when I got to be in high school, I believe it was my junior year, I was playing on another team. And I had switched teams to go to this team. All right. And I wasn't awarded any letter. And same player, I worked hard. It was no different. And I remember that I was very upset about it at the time. And I called the coach, which to be fair to him, he was absolutely willing to take that call. He wasn't mad at me or anything like that. He understood why I wanted a letter. And he explained to me why he chose other people for the C's and the A. Now, his reasons were seniority and that these kids had been on the team, and that he did say you do work very hard and it's appreciated, but this is the way he's going. And looking back on it now, I was disappointed, but I do appreciate looking back on it now that he had explained that to me. But it shows you that my standard for leadership was different from his standard for leadership. And that's okay. Like again, now that I'm older and I'm a coach myself, that's okay. All right. And the captains that we did have that year were good. But it shows you how important this can be in someone's life. Right. I never took getting a letter for granted, ever. I never did after that first time I got that A. I understood the responsibility of it. In fact, again, when I was I'm telling a lot of stories today, but when I was overseas in England, I was a coach and player for the Royal Air Force team. Right. And I was honored to play with these people that were serving in the Royal Air Force. And they awarded me with the C multiple times. And I took that. I mean, these are people that serve awarding me a C. I was a male military spouse, okay, which is, I always joke, the lowest rank in the military. All right. And here they are giving me a C. I took that super. I mean, I was honored. I was honored to take the C. So the point of these stories is, it's awarded and it's earned at the same time, right? It's something sacred that you really want to establish that with your team. Mike, to your point, have those conversations, sit the whole team down. Here's the qualities of a great leader, whether you're selected for it or not, because I want to teach you young people about leadership, about teamwork. All right. Parents that are listening to this show, I'm an employer. All right. I always look for people that have been on a sports team to work at my companies. Okay. Doesn't mean I won't hire someone that doesn't, but I can tell you this right now, buying into the team culture that we've created at my companies, right? Athletes tend to have a better grip on that. They also can deal with adversity better. It's not a shot at kids who don't play sports. It's more of a boosting of kids that do. Christie, I'm sure your kids, as they entered the real world, were infinitely more prepared for adversity. And I always call it the mid-20s shift, when life just punches you right in the face, right? Of just like, hey, there's no grades anymore. you know, I bet you they might have struggled, but I bet you they also succeeded because of their time on a sports team. Is that correct?
Oh, there's no doubt.
Right.
I mean, there's so many qualities and that they've gained by playing sports that's transitioned so well in the work environment.
Right.
Hey, I have a scenario for you, Mike. Let's say, I'm going to ask him because you've got kids who voted for someone who they think should be captain, and they are clearly the most talented kid on the team.
Right.
Can lead you to victory, but they're a rotten kid. Would you then veto that vote? Because that could cause a lot of dissension if all the kids want this kid on the team because this player is the best. Popular because this player also, is maybe
Fun.
someone who's fun. Yeah.
Right.
Would you veto that vote, or would you let the kids have their way?
Yeah. So, and I've had this happen maybe more than once, right? It'd probably be, for me, it would be like a reclamation process. I would say, listen, let's come in the room. You're clearly so popular. The guys like you, the girls like you, whatever it is. You could be a great asset for this team, but these are the kind of things that I need you to do for me in order for me to accept the fact that the team wants you. And more times than not, you're going to find young people will respond to that and understand now the heightened responsibility that they now have within your world. And I think, because you could have just as much of an issue with these people that all voted for them, right? And then say, well, what do you mean you're just going to discount who we like? Especially if you said, hey, whoever gets voted is going to get in, right? You can't say that. So I think for me, it's just a matter of, all right, we set the table. Let's have the conversation. Let's make sure the responsibility on this player is the expectations are there. But I also would probably then slide in the player I need to counteract that kid and have a backup, so that when this kid blows up on me,
right,
that I have somebody to kind of fill that void.
Mike,
have you guys ever stripped someone of the C? Have you ever stripped them?
Well, I was just going to say, Christie, that's a great transition to the next topic. So the next topic is what happens when the captain gets in trouble, right? Yeah. So, Christie, this speaks directly to what you're saying. I'll say this first, okay? A great way to avoid this, or at least to make it easier, is to set the standard and set the rules at the beginning of the season. I think it's one of the most important things that's not done enough. Set very clear roles for your players too, but for your captain these are the standards to be a leader on this team. That way, if they do break a rule, you're in a much easier position to make a decision. Now, and Mike, I'll let you jump into this because Christie asked you. The severity of what happens has a lot to do with whether a C is coming off or not. All right. Because there's a difference between oversleeping and missing a practice and going out and getting drunk with your friends and coming to practice drunk. There's a huge difference between those two. So, Mike, I'm going to throw that back to you. But, again, it's what happens if a captain gets in trouble. And Christie's question is, have you ever stripped the C?
Yeah, I mean, I have. And I think it all, but I also have learned as I, from being a head coach at a very young age. I was kind of similar to Lee. Like, I was a coach of a college hockey program, pretty much 4 years removed from college.
Right.
And I had players that were almost the same age as me, so it became very hard to, you just have to think about how you're going to approach those pieces. And then, stripping a captaincy of a kid is a big deal. Like, is it stripping a captaincy and then removing the player from the team? Is it stripping the captaincy and then the kid's still on the team? So there's a whole, and I've had a couple of captains where they've gotten some major trouble, like getting calls at 4:00 in the morning from the campus police saying, I'm here with your captain and 7 of his teammates. And I'm almost like, okay, well, you're all together. So that's actually a really great thing, because you came in, you weren't the problem. You're the one that came in there, like, trying to help. These are college kids, they're going they're going to be, they're going to do stupid things every now and then. But I think I have taken the captaincy away, but I think it really has depended on the situation. But sure. I also have over the course of my coaching career now, especially with any player over the age of 12, I've tried to be much more gray in my rules than steadfast rules that I know are probably going to get broken, then I'm going to have to react to them.
Sure.
Sometimes if I can keep it a little grayer, I can then, to Lee's point, I can say, okay, well, you were late for practice. There's consequences to that.
Right.
But if my rule was, if you're late for practice, you're done as a captain, it's hard. It's going to be hard for me, right? Because there's circumstances and everything. But I think it all depends on the age and the severity of what it is. But certainly it's a really and if you want to send the message, listen, I've taken captaincies away and the kids earned it back.
Right.
So I was like, listen, this is not the standard that we can have here. And all of a sudden the kid's like wakes up and says, oh man, you know what? I didn't realize how, how I was really cannibalizing this group of players. So and again, I use always that kind of stuff as teaching moments. And because listen, I've made my share of mistakes as a player and a coach. And I'd hate someone to put me and my coach because, I made
it can be a real turning point for the kid. I mean, if the kid has good character and is passionate about the sport and the team, they're going to step up and do the right thing. And if they're not, they're going to quit the team.
Right?
You won't see the kid again. I'm done.
We're talking about
I've
character.
seen that happen.
Right. Yeah. We're talking about character in the face of adversity, and like, again, keeping in mind the show is about youth players, right? You might be teaching that player something that will stay with them for life in a good way, should you have to take the C away. And Mike, I love that you're willing to reward it back, because basically what you're saying is, like, we have these standards, you have gone beneath them, and you're going to have to prove to me that you can raise yourself back up to above the standard. And as we all just said, you either will or you won't. And if you will, it says a lot about you, because that's really hard to re-earn a captaincy.
And if you want to,
right.
if it means so much to you that you're going to fight for that. And even fighting for the respect back without even getting the C put on.
Right.
Just the fact that you're all of a sudden now going to be a leader and be like, listen, I don't have to have the C. I am the leader of this team. Well, you didn't act like it's Saturday morning at 3:00 in the morning. So, what are you going to do now to help this team come back to what we need to do? And I think even at the younger levels, it's the same thing. Are you going to be the kid that oversleeps and is always late and doesn't, respect the locker room, or doesn't respect your or doesn't, especially at the younger levels too, the ability for kids to see other kids getting bullied or being degraded on or being influenced in a negative way. Right. And you just not stepping up because, like, I don't know, I'm not the captain. Like, why would I say anything? Well, there's a huge void there we have to make sure we fill.
Right. I'll tell you about a complicated situation, because again, Mike, you bring up the severity of an offense, right? And keeping some gray area. I remember same team I was coaching. This is a funny story, but it ended up working out. Again, I'm very strict with my standards. And Christie, this kind of goes actually to a comment you made earlier. I will. I don't want to say I'll sacrifice winning, but I will put winning on the line if I feel like someone is threatening my team bond and my standards, my culture. All right, because the culture is more important to me than winning, in the sense of I don't think I can win without it. That's my personal stance. And I remember that, and again, you want to talk about a unique situation. I remember one year, both of my captains who were over 21, were late to a practice because they were a little hungover from drinking the night before. Now, it was very much within their right to do that. They're over 21. They made a bad decision. They probably drank a little too much. They did whatever they did. But technically, they didn't really do anything wrong outside being late to practice, right? So everybody kind of knew what happened. They knew they were hungover. All right. In that scenario, going basis by basis, I thought stripping the captaincy would be a little extreme, right? Because again, technically they were just late to practice. So what I did was I benched them both for a period in our next game, right? And I got the same message across. Wow, he's willing to bench our captains for that mistake. And what I remember is, and again, I didn't plan it this way, but what I remember is I benched them for a period, and when they were unleashed in the second period, they went out and scored an amazing amount of goals in a very big game. I remember one of their parents coming up to me going, that was a genius move not playing him in the first. He had no idea. Genius move not playing him in the first.
You hit them from the other team.
I was so surprised that I was like, oh yeah, it was great. right? But like,
It was all in the plan.
right. I love it when a plan comes together. No, here's the thing. I needed to send a message to my team that was not okay. You don't show up late to practice and definitely not hungover. And it was obvious, if you know what I'm trying to say. Look,
Yeah.
they made a mistake. They paid for it. The team got the same message. They didn't need their seats stripped from that. Right. Now, I've also seen, look, standards, if you get arrested, you're losing your C at any level. Right. If you put another player in danger, right. You might be losing your C, right? Again, it depends on the situation and the standard. But I also just want to impress. There are other ways to punish a captain while also making sure that the team understands that, the standard's been bent here, and that's not okay, right? But again, this is up for each individual coach, each individual team. I actually like what Mike said. Again, I think there are obvious standards that need to be set, but I also think there can be gray room. Again, that the captains that got drunk, that was a little bit of gray room for me, right? They're over 21. I'm not their mom or their dad. They have a right to drink if they want to drink. They made a mistake, right? They paid for it. And we moved on as a team. It was squashed right there. It was squashed right there. So,
yeah, but I mean,
yeah.
I tend to, going on the side of like, how do you pick these kids, right? And how do you find those qualities? Like you'll even like, I know at the beginning of a lot of years, I'll test the kids just by doing things that, that are maybe a little extreme. Like, okay, after every practice for a whole week, I pick those two kids and like, okay, guys, you got the pucks again. All right, you guys got the pucks again. You guys got the pucks again. And then you see, you're like, okay, well, they're not breaking. And they're just saying, hey, I'm picking up pucks. And this is
right.
Part of what I do. And then you'll start seeing what I love is all of a sudden you might see a freshman go, all right, this is kind of, I better go help him pick up pucks. Right. And then all of a sudden they're helping pick up pucks. And then maybe the two juniors stay and they go, well, why are those guys always picking up pucks? And all of a sudden they start going, and now the whole team's picking up pucks at the end of practice. That's a very, I know it seems like a very trivial thing, but over the course of
huge.
The chance of trying, the time of trying to say, listen, I don't think these guys are above you. And matter of fact, you shouldn't think that you're above them. And, and I think that you can start building the ability to be a good captain by what you do as a coach as well.
Well, and this is another great transition point. We wanted to end the show on a good note. So the final topic is qualities of great captain, which, Mike, you just segued us in perfectly. And I want us all to speak about this because there are so many qualities of a good captain. And, I'm a big believer of servant leadership in the sense of when I'm in a leadership role, I really serve the people that I'm leading, not the other way around. They don't serve me. Right. So as Mike just said, you might make the captains pick up the pucks because they're serving the team and now the team sees it. Right. Or another thing is maybe, going the other way, maybe the freshmen and the sophomores or the younger players have to pick up the pucks and do the water bottles. But as a captain, I need to show them how to do that. So I'm going to do it with them for a bit so they can see that I had to do this when I was a freshman too. Let me show you how to do it right. So we all don't get colds or flus or something worse. Let's not mention the COVID word again. But, that's the point. It's servant leadership. Christie, I wanted to swing to you here because you're a leader in your community. All right. For those of you who don't know, Christie is an anchor in Syracuse. She has been for several years, right? You're a leader in your community. So this is something that you're called upon every single day. And I want to draw on your experience here because the captaincy leadership, it's not limited to hockey, it's not limited to sports, right? Christie's someone who is literally invited into the living rooms of everybody in the greater Syracuse area every single day to report and bring them the news. So Christie, talk to us a little bit about what you think the great qualities are of a leader and maybe some of the qualities that you've had to use yourself in your community.
Well, there's definitely 3 C's to it, and we'll go over that. So let's talk about consistency. I mean, you have to every day live by those same standards. You have to be consistent, have moral character, positivity, also just kind of a passion. You got to bring it every day. You got to bring it. You can't be up and down, especially down. That's not going to do anyone any good. You also have to be a little courageous because you're going to take criticism.
I love that.
And you got to be up for that challenge. And sometimes you have to make decisions that aren't going to be the most popular, but it's the right decision all the time. And the 3rd C is caring. That is so important, to care about each other, to take the time to listen, whether it's a colleague or a teammate, especially in high school. Kids are going through so many emotional ups and downs.
Say that again.
Just to be able to take the time out to say, hey, you know what? I care about you. I love my daughter's senior year. There was a freshman who hadn't scored at all the season. And the last game of the season, the captains, and Sophia was one of them, said, hey, you know what? We're gonna make sure she scores. Just get the puck to her and make sure she scores, because we're gonna end our senior year. They didn't care about them scoring. They wanted, the freshman girl who hadn't scored at all to score. And that was everyone just like broke out in tears because they really cared about her and they just wanted to do something to uplift, a teammate, and just kind of ended on a great note. And that, you have so many opportunities as a captain to lead and to direct your fellow teammates into some really memorable moments that you'll treasure for the rest of your life.
I love that you bring up the word opportunity as a leader, right? Because there is so much opportunity in being a leader, and again, you've embodied that for a long time in Syracuse, and that's one of the things I love about working with you is that, you really have a grip on being a leader. If there were team captains in journalism in Syracuse, New York, you are the captain,
Oh, thank you.
That's how I look at it. An award-winning captain, by the way. Mike, switching to you, you and I in the game, we've seen a lot of captains. We played before a lot of captains. What are the qualities of a great captain for you?
Yeah, Christie nails, those 3 C's of having, and then, knowing that when you are a captain, if you want to be embraced as a leader, you're going to have to make a lot of sacrifices for a lot of things that maybe, a lot of, especially high school kids, right? But a lot of players aren't doing. Maybe you're the player that needs to come a little early. Maybe you're the player like I said earlier about going to team meetings, like, oh geez, I got to go see the coach again for breakfast every Tuesday morning. That's a sacrifice, right? You're asking to give, be a little selfless and sacrifice for the greater good of the team, and being the captain or being a leader, you're going to have to do those things. I use the example, and I probably overused it with the coaches that I work with. We have Marty St. Louis in the organization that I'm in, and we don't coach together, but he's one of the coaches that's on the ice before me. And every practice, he lets the kids off the ice, and again, I'm not that I want to call out the other younger coaches, but they, the Zamboni doors open up and they get off the ice and they go up to the locker room, and he's out there on his knees, one by one, picking up pucks, putting them in the bucket, and I'm looking out, like I'm looking at my players saying, do you understand who this person is? He's out there, picking up the pucks to, so that and then moving the nets, and not saying, hey, somebody else needs to do that, and that's not my job. But he's a leader within the organization. You could clearly see he was a captain, right? But going to your point about where how does captaincy result in real life? He nobody's naming him, oh, you're the captain of the coaching staff. Right. He's a leader no matter what. And I think that's the kind of stuff I look for in all my kids that end up in those situations, that they're going to do things that other kids aren't going to do. They're going to do things on their own that coaches don't have to ask them to do. And they're going to, sacrifice a lot of opportunity that maybe a lot of kids take for granted. The first one's out of the locker room, they're gone, right? They're going to fill the voids in those areas and make sure, oh, maybe I got to sit around and help clean the locker room up. Maybe I'm going to be the guy who collects all the tip money for the manager at the end of the year. Those are the kind of things that captains and leaders do that aren't in the captain book. The book stuff, captain, right? So a lot of those things, but I think Christie really nails it, though.
Look for the kids that can elevate the other kids on the team. That's really important. That's a special captain.
I'll tell you that the common bind between all three of us here is the ability for a captain to embody the standard, right? And embodying the standards that you've set for your team or your organization is so important. And that's why we said it before, whether it's good grades at the youth level, right? The work ethic, the skill, the time, the extra things you do to put yourself out there. You embody the standard. With your permission, friends, I'm going to end this episode on a story, as I like to tell stories. I'm going to tell you about, it's story time. I'm going to tell you about one of the best captains I ever had. This captain was so good that he taught me, he made me a better coach, right? That's what I loved about him. All right. Takes place over in the United Kingdom, in Peterborough, United Kingdom. All right. And the team that I was coaching on, I was an assistant coach, was the second worst team in the league when the coaching staff that I was part of took over. And the captain of the team was born and raised in this city. Okay. So he's born and raised in Peterborough. And he had been the captain of the team for several years when we took over. He's a mild-mannered young man. I'll never forget this because I'm a very, I get a lot of energy, right? Very mild-mannered, good human being. He's a school teacher when he's not playing hockey. I'm just trying to paint the picture here. And I remember meeting with him, and I could tell that he had never been enabled to have the C. He was just kind of the hometown hero, and they gave it to him. But he was a good captain. And I remember talking with him and explaining to him, like, this is how I want this to run. And this, he was so shocked that the coach had taken any interest in him, right? Now, this is the coolest story about, his name is James Ferrara. Still is, by the way. Still alive, obviously. His two brothers, Robbie and Luke Ferrara, were on the team that year. So it's a very unique situation where you have three brothers on the same pro team, right? And again, you never know how long that's going to last. In fact, the following year, his younger brother, Luke, went up to the higher level of pro, so they never played together again. We had such a great time establishing him. He was such a good communicator to the team. He was able to take in any situation, no matter what the emotional level, and really break it down calmly and report it back to us. And so good about, this is the heartbeat of the locker room, to explain that. This is why I don't think we should do this, right? I mean, he could have been a coach. This is how great he was. Long story short, this is how that season ended. This is Jimmy right here. All right. That's us winning the EPL playoff championship, right? This is the most genuine face I've ever seen him make, right? You can tell how much this meant to him. All right. I wrote in that book, Win, that he is the consummate captain. He is the standard for me as a coach of what a great captain should be. And what he taught me was that you don't need to be the loudest voice in the room. He didn't even talk that much, to be honest with you. He always led by example. And when he spoke, though, everyone listened, right? You don't have to be that. He was not the most talented player on the team. He was not the loudest player on the team. Wasn't the fastest. Wasn't the youngest. Wasn't the oldest. He just was that perfect mixture of all of those things. And everyone looked up to him, including his brothers, right? His brothers obviously both became leaders as well, right? Eventually. So it just goes to show you, it doesn't have to be what you think. We have this kind of like, the captain is this glorified superhero, right? And don't get me wrong, they can become that. But find that person that sets the standard, that embodies the standard. He embodied everything we were trying to accomplish. And this is the funny thing about it. He had been there. He had been there the whole time, and no one had enabled him to be the leader he could be. There's a lot of reasons why we won a championship that season. He is one of the major reasons, right? I'll have to send him this episode so he can hear me say that. I think he knows that. But again, I'm going to close out here unless either of you have anything else that you want to say. Again,
one more thing.
Please, Christie Casciano-Burns, you're on.
I'm going to end it by saying that a real star or captain makes everybody shine.
That's a great statement. Mike, you got anything? You're just nodding.
I love it.
Try and one-up that, Mike.
Well, I'm done.
Because Christie just made us shine.
Come on, bring it.
Christie just made us shine. That's what I got to say. All right. This was a great episode. I had a lot of fun talking about this with my friends Christie Casciano-Burns and Mike Benelli. This is Our Kids Play Hockey. Check us out on ourkidsplayhockey.com. Find us wherever podcasts you're listening to them. You can't miss us. Make sure you check us out on Facebook, ourkidsplayhockey.com, or find us at WeLive.hockey. Again, once again, for Christie Casciano-Burns, for Mike Benelli, I'm Lee Elias. Thank you so much for watching this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey, and we'll see you on the next episode. Have a great night, everybody.